Talk to my lawyer, she's my new lover, my husband said to me as he cut his steak, as if he were talking about the weather. The next day, that same woman asked me for a job. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Dolores Rodriguez, I'm 69 years old, and until that gray October Tuesday in Austin, I believed I had a family that loved me. I was serving dinner in our house in Hyde Park, that red brick house we had bought 30 years ago with so much effort. The aroma of slow-cooked brisket filled the kitchen, but something in the air felt heavy, like it does right before a storm. Anthony, my husband of 42 years, was sitting in his usual spot, at the head of the wooden table my father had given us as a wedding gift. His hands, which once trembled with nerves when he proposed to me on the grounds of the state capitol, now cut the meat with a coldness that made my blood run cold. He hadn't looked me in the eye all evening. Is something wrong, honey? I asked as I spooned more gravy onto his plate. Those words came out automatically, as they had thousands of times over decades of caring for him, of worrying about him, of putting his needs before my own. He dropped his fork on the plate with a metallic clatter that echoed in the silence. He wiped his mouth with the embroidered napkin I had made myself years ago, during those long afternoons when the children were small and he worked late at the construction company. Yes, Dolores. There's something I have to tell you. His voice sounded distant, as if he were already speaking from another place, from another life where I didn't exist. You're going to have to talk to my lawyer. My heart started racing. A lawyer? What for? My mind started searching for rational explanations. Maybe he had problems at work, maybe some legal issue with the company. Your lawyer? I don't understand, Anthony. What happened? He raised his gaze and for the first time that night, he looked me directly in the eye. What I saw there shattered my soul. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was like looking at a stranger who had taken over the body of the man I had loved my entire adult life. Because she's also my new lover, he said with a calm so brutal it felt like a punch to the gut. She'll take care of everything you're entitled to. The words hung in the air like daggers. My new lover. Everything you're entitled to. Every syllable stabbed me in the chest, opening wounds I didn't know could exist. What am I entitled to? I stammered, feeling my voice break. Whatever part you get, if you get anything at all, he replied, shrugging, as if he were discussing how to split the last of the beans. I was paralyzed. 42 years of marriage. 3 children we had raised together. A house we had built brick by brick, dream by dream. Sleepless nights when he had a fever, mornings making him breakfast before he left for work, evenings waiting for him with a hot dinner. All reduced to, if you get anything at all. Anthony stood up with the same tranquility he had sat down with. He took his jacket from the back of the chair and headed for the door. I remained seated, clinging to the edge of the table, feeling the world crumble beneath my feet. Oh, and please, he stopped in the doorway without turning to look at me, don't make a scene. Nobody wants to see a hysterical old woman. The door closed with a dry click that marked the end of my life as I had known it. I stayed there, surrounded by the smell of food I could no longer smell, looking at his half-empty plate, hearing the echo of those terrible words, nobody wants to see a hysterical old woman. My hands were trembling as I took his plate to the sink. The meal I had prepared with so much love, thinking of his favorite flavors, now looked like leftovers. Just like me. Like everything my life had been. That night I lay awake in our bed, smelling his cologne on the empty pillow, remembering the first time he told me, I love you, under the live oak trees in Zilker Park. I remembered our first photos together, when I was young and he told me I was the most beautiful woman in Austin. I remembered the day Robert, our first son, was born, and how Anthony cried with happiness. I remembered the Christmases, the birthdays, the silver wedding anniversary where we renewed our vows. Was all of that a lie? Or did it just have an expiration date? As the hours passed in the darkness, one question tormented me: how long had he been planning this? When had he stopped loving me? Was there anything I could have done differently? And the most painful one of all, was I really just a hysterical old woman? The next morning, the phone rang just as I had managed to fall asleep. It was 8 in the morning and I was still in the same nightgown I had spent the sleepless night in, staring at the family photos hanging on the walls like silent witnesses to a happiness that now seemed fake. Mrs. Dolores Rodriguez, the voice on the other end of the line sounded professional, cold, calculated. It was a young, educated voice, the kind of voice that had learned to pronounce each word with precision to intimidate. Yes, this is she, I answered, my throat hoarse from the previous night's tears. My name is Lucy Sanchez, I'm your husband Anthony's attorney. I assume he's already told you about our situation. Our situation. As if I were part of some business deal. As if 42 years of marriage were simply a clause that had expired. Yes, was all I could say, feeling my throat tighten. Perfect. Then you already know I'll be handling the division of assets. But since I have you on the phone. Her tone suddenly changed, becoming sweet, almost servile. I wanted to ask you for a personal favor. A favor? The woman sleeping with my husband was asking me for a favor? You see, Mrs. Rodriguez, I've heard you have very good contacts at the Austin Cultural Foundation, where they give those workshops for senior citizens. I'm looking for job opportunities there. It would be wonderful to have your recommendation. The world stopped. This woman, who had destroyed my marriage, who was helping my husband strip me of everything, was asking me to help her get a job. The blood rushed to my head like a boiling wave. Have you no shame? I managed to articulate through clenched teeth. She laughed. She laughed with a lightness that turned my stomach, as if my pain were an amusing anecdote. Oh, Mrs. Rodriguez, life goes on. You, of all people, should understand that at your age. Things change, people change. It's part of growing up. I slammed the phone down so hard I was afraid I had broken it. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach but bitter bile. The disgust doubled me over, but it wasn't just because of her words. It was the realization that I had been so naive, so blind, so stupid. As I splashed cold water on my face, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. There I was, Dolores Rodriguez, 69 years old, gray hair I no longer bothered to dye since Anthony stopped noticing me, wrinkles around my eyes that told the story of 1,000 smiles dedicated to a family that no longer valued me. When had I stopped seeing myself? When had I begun to exist only in relation to others? The memories came in a flood. I remembered when I sold my mother's jewelry, the pieces I had treasured for years, to pay for Robert's college tuition. It's for his future, Mom, Anthony had told me. A Rodriguez with a college degree. They never asked if I wanted to study anything. It never mattered that I had dropped out of high school to get married and start a family. I remembered the nights Anthony came home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine, and I would pretend to be asleep to avoid confronting a truth I wasn't ready to face. A board meeting, he'd say. Dinner with important clients. And I would heat up his food, make him chamomile tea for his digestion, and iron his shirts for the next day. I remembered when Maria, my only daughter, got married. I had spent all my secret savings, the money I had scraped together dollar by dollar selling tamales on weekends at the city market, to give her the wedding of her dreams. I want it to be perfect, Mom. I'm only getting married once. 3 years later she got divorced and didn't even invite me to the hearing. It's too personal, she told me over the phone. As if I hadn't paid for every detail of that charade. I remembered when Stephen, my youngest son, needed money for his computer business. I mortgaged the house without Anthony knowing, signing papers I barely understood, trusting that my son would pay me back as he had promised. The business went bankrupt in 6 months. Stephen disappeared for a whole year. When he came back, he just said, "I'm sorry, Mom, but that's business." He never paid back a single dollar. He never knew that because of that debt, I stopped taking my blood pressure medication for months because I couldn't afford it. And there was George, my middle child, the one who had always been different. When he left home at 18 after a terrible fight with his father about his tendencies, as Anthony called them, I was the one who secretly looked for him. I was the one who brought him food when he was living in that miserable room in East Austin. I was the one who hugged him when he cried telling me he was gay and was afraid we would hate him. "I'll never hate you, Mijo," I told him. "You're my son, period." But when Anthony found out about my visits, he forbade me from seeing him again. Choose, Dolores. Him or your family. And I, a coward, chose silence. 42 years of small sacrifices that had become my entire life. 42 years of putting everyone before myself. 42 years of believing that love was demonstrated by giving everything, without expecting anything in return. The phone rang again. This time it was Robert, my eldest son, the successful accountant, the pride of the family. "Mom, Dad told me everything. Don't be dramatic, okay? These things happen." "These things happen?" I repeated in disbelief. "Yeah, Mom. Marriages end. But look on the bright side, Dad says he's going to let you have the country house, the one in Wimberley. It's not so bad, right? It's small but functional. The country house. A 2-room structure with no gas line and an outhouse, which we used for vacations when the kids were little. That was my reward for a lifetime of devotion. Robert, your father left me for another woman. He's kicking me out of my home after 42 years. Oh, Mom, don't be so negative. Think about us, too. Dad says Ms. Sanchez is helping organize the inheritance so that everything is divided up properly. We don't want legal problems later. The inheritance. I wasn't even dead and they were already planning how to divide up my remains. The inheritance of what, Robert? Everything is in your father's name. Well, but we have to think about the future. Dad is getting older, and we have our own families to support. I hung up without saying goodbye. For the first time in my life, I hung up the phone on one of my children. I sat in the living room, surrounded by family photographs that now stared at me like mocking ghosts. There was the photo from Robert's wedding, where I looked radiant next to his new wife. I had organized the entire reception, I had cooked for 200 people, I had spent every last dollar I had. In the next photo was Maria at her first communion, in the white dress I had sewn myself, night after night, so it would be unique. And there was Stephen at his high school graduation, the only one he managed to finish, hugging me while I cried with happiness. All those beautiful moments, had they meant anything to them? Or were they just services they took for granted, like the water from the tap or the light from a switch? The silence of the house was deafening. A silence I used to fill with music while I cleaned, with phone calls organizing family gatherings, with the sound of food simmering on the stove for a child who would come, just for a little while, but would end up staying for dinner and taking leftovers for the week. Now the silence was different. It was the sound of a life that had been built around others and that, now that they were gone, was collapsing like a house of cards. That afternoon, I walked through the house, touching the furniture as if they were relics of a lost civilization. The dining room where we had celebrated so many Christmases. The living room where the kids did their homework while I ironed, watching soap operas. The kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals, each one conceived with love for someone who now treated me like an inconvenience. In my bedroom, I opened the closet and saw my clothes hanging next to the empty space where Anthony's used to be. Dresses I had bought thinking he would like them, blouses I had chosen to look presentable at parent-teacher conferences, comfortable shoes for the long days of being a homemaker. My entire identity reduced to the function of serving others. In the back of the closet, wrapped in tissue paper, I found my wedding dress. I took it out carefully and spread it on the bed. The fabric had yellowed with age, but it still held the innocence of my 20-year-old self, when I believed that love was forever and family was sacred. I looked at that dress and for the first time, I wondered, who was Dolores before she became Anthony's wife and the mother of his children? What had the girl who wore this white dress with so much hope dreamed of? The answer terrified me, I couldn't remember. The following days were like living in a glass house that was slowly cracking. Every sound was amplified, every silence became deafening. The mailman no longer brought lost love letters from my youth, but legal notices with the seal of the family court. The phone would ring, but it was never to ask how I was, but to ask for signatures, documents, explanations about assets I thought were mine but apparently never had been. Maria arrived 3 days later, but not alone. She brought her 2 children, my grandchildren Paul and Sophia, aged 8 and 10. The kids ran to me as always, filling the empty house with their laughter. But Maria had that tense expression she had inherited from her father, that way of furrowing her brow when she was preparing to say something unpleasant. "Mom, we need to talk," she said as she poured coffee into the porcelain cups that had belonged to my mother-in-law. The same cups Anthony had taken the week before and that Maria had brought back, so you don't miss the nice things, as if it were an act of charity. "What do you want to talk about, Mija?" "The kids have been asking about Grandpa. They don't understand why he doesn't come over anymore." I looked at Paul and Sophia playing on the rug with the same wooden cars I had bought for their parents 30 years ago. These children who hugged me with pure love, with no ulterior motives, without calculating what they could get from me. "What have you told them?" "The truth. That Grandpa is living somewhere else now, with a very nice lady who loves them very much." A very nice lady. Lucy, the lawyer lover, was already very nice to my grandchildren. The dagger twisted deeper in my chest. "Is he seeing them?" "Yes, Mom. He takes them to the park on Sundays. He buys them ice cream, toys. She's very sweet to them." My grandchildren, who used to spend Sundays with me baking cookies and watching old Jimmy Stewart movies, now had a new 35-year-old grandmother who could buy them things I could no longer afford. "Maria, don't you think it's strange that this woman is playing grandmother to your children?" "Oh, Mom, don't start. Lucy is polite, she has money, she treats them well. The kids need stability, not adult drama." Stability. Where was this need for stability when I stayed up all night taking care of them when they had a fever? Where was it when I spent my pension money on their school supplies because Maria was a little tight on cash? Where was it when I sold my engagement ring to pay for Paul's dental work? Besides, Maria continued as she put something in her purse, "Lucy told me you were very rude to her on the phone. That you hung up on her." "She told you that?" "Yes. And I don't think that's right, Mom. She's trying to help with this whole process. We could be civilized." Civilized. As if civilization consisted of smiling while they destroyed your life. "Maria, that woman asked me for a job." Asked me for a job. The same day I found out she was sleeping with your father. Well, everyone has the right to move on with their life, don't they? Besides, Dad looks happy. I haven't seen him smile like that in years. I haven't seen him smile like that in years. With those words, Maria had just confirmed that the entire family had witnessed the slow death of my marriage and no one had lifted a finger to help me. They had all seen Anthony pull away, become cold, treat me with contempt, and they had decided it was normal. That it was what I deserved. That night, after Maria left with the children so they don't get sad watching Grandma cry, I sat down to review the papers I had been avoiding. Utility bills that were still in my name but that Anthony had stopped paying. The phone bill, $400. The electricity, $600. The gas, $200. The car maintenance, $1,500. I took out my checkbook and added up my income, the pension from my job at the textile factory where I had worked for 20 years before getting married, $2,800 a month. The interest from a small savings account I had, $150. Total, $2,950 a month to live on. My basic expenses were more than double that. Anthony had handled the finances for decades. I had never seen the main bank accounts, never known exactly how much he earned, never participated in the major financial decisions. That's what I work for, he would say. You don't worry about those things. And I, like the perfect traditional wife I was raised to be, had trusted him blindly. Now I was discovering that my name didn't appear on any account. The house was in Anthony's name. The car was in Anthony's name. The investments I thought we had made together were in Anthony's name. 42 years of marriage, and legally, I didn't exist anywhere. The phone rang. It was Stephen, my youngest son, the one who had disappeared for a year after his business failed with my money. Mom, how are you? His voice sounded different. Softer, more affectionate. Like when he was a boy and would come to apologize after getting into some trouble. I'm okay, son. Just trying to understand all this. Look, Mom, I wanted to see you. Can I come by tomorrow? I want to talk. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe Stephen, my baby, had come to rescue me. Maybe one of my children remembered he had a mother, that this mother had sacrificed everything for him. He arrived early the next day, with flowers. Red roses, my favorite. He hugged me tightly and I cried on his chest like I hadn't cried since Anthony left. He smelled the same as when he was a boy, of soap and that cheap cologne he had used since he was a teenager. Forgive me, Mom. Forgive me for getting lost, for not being here when you needed me. It doesn't matter, son. What's important is that you're here now. We spent the morning talking. He told me about his new girlfriend, his job at a software company, how he had learned from his mistakes. He promised he would help me, that he wouldn't leave me alone, that we would get through this together. But for that to happen, Mom, I need you to help me with something. There it was. The condition. There was always a condition. I need you to sign some papers. They're to protect your rights. Dad and that woman are trying to do funny things with the properties, and if we don't act fast, they'll leave you with nothing. He pulled out a folder full of official documents. Pages and pages filled with words I didn't understand, with notary seals and signatures that looked important. It's to temporarily transfer the house into my name, he explained. That way Dad can't sell it or give it to that woman. When everything is resolved, I'll give it back to you. It's just a legal protection. My gut was screaming at me not to sign. Something felt wrong, like when you eat something spoiled and your stomach warns you before your mind understands. But it was Stephen, my son, who was hugging me and telling me he loved me. The one who had come with flowers to ask for forgiveness. Are you sure this is legal? Of course, Mom. I went to a lawyer. The consultation cost me $3,000, but it's worth it to protect you. I signed. I signed everything he put in front of me, trusting that my son was taking care of me as I had taken care of him for 38 years. A week later, I received a letter from the bank. My house had been sold. The buyer, Anthony Rodriguez, my husband. The seller, Stephen Rodriguez, my son. The price, one symbolic dollar. Stephen had sold my house to his father for $1. I called the number I had for him. The phone was disconnected. I went to the address he had given me. It didn't exist. I asked at the software company where he supposedly worked. They had never heard of him. My own son had conned me. He had lied to me, hugged me, told me he loved me, only to hand me over on a silver platter to my executioner. That night, sitting in my now empty living room because Anthony had sent men to take away all the furniture that belonged to him, I finally understood the magnitude of my naivety. I hadn't just been a cheated wife. I had been a fool who had mistaken habit for love, affection for convenience, family for exploitation. I took out my phone and dialed the number for George, my middle child, the one who had to leave home for being gay, the one who grew up feeling he had to hide who he was to deserve love. Mom, his voice sounded surprised. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. George, I need to ask you something. Tell me. Did you know what was happening? Did you know about your father and that woman? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Yes, Mom. I knew. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you knew too and had decided to stay quiet. Like always. Like always. My silence had been interpreted as complicity, my patience as stupidity, my unconditional love as weakness. George, your siblings sold me out. They literally sold me out. I'm not surprised, he said with a bitterness that broke my heart. They learned from the best. Dad always taught us that people are to be used until they're no longer useful. And what are you going to do? Nothing, Mom. I can't save you from a family you chose over me 15 years ago. And he hung up. I stayed on the living room floor, surrounded by the rectangular marks the furniture had left on the carpet. Ghostly marks of a life that no longer existed. Just like me. Like everything I had built. For the first time since it all began, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just stayed there, in silence, understanding that I had lived 69 years for others, and that now, finally, I was left alone with myself. And I didn't know who that woman was. The eviction notice arrived in a yellow envelope that the mailman handed to me with an uncomfortable smile. I had 15 days to vacate the house that had been my home for 30 years. 15 days to disappear from the life I had built brick by brick, dream by dream. When Robert found out I had received the notice, he came over that same afternoon with his wife, Claudia. They wore an expression I knew well, the face they made when they wanted to convince me of something they knew was wrong. Mom, this has gotten out of hand, Robert said, sitting in one of the few remaining chairs. Stephen had no right to do that. Oh, now you're concerned? I shot back from the kitchen, where I was packing the last of the dishes Anthony had forgotten to take. I've always been concerned about you. But you have to understand, we couldn't get involved in the problems between Stephen and Dad. Claudia nodded with that fake smile she had perfected over 15 years of marriage to my son. Besides, Dolores, maybe this is for the best. This house is too big for you alone. It'll be very expensive for you to maintain. It was my house, Claudia. The house where I raised my children, where I welcomed my grandchildren. But look on the positive side, Robert intervened. Dad told us he's going to let you have the little house in Wimberley. You'll be more peaceful there, without so many responsibilities. More peaceful. As if peace were the prize for being stripped of everything. And where were you when Stephen was tricking me? Where were you when I signed those papers? Robert and Claudia exchanged a look. That look confirmed what I already suspected, they knew. They all knew. Look, Mom, Robert cleared his throat, we thought you had talked to Dad. That you had reached an agreement. An agreement? What kind of agreement are you talking about? Well, that you had realized things between you two weren't working anymore and had decided to separate civilly. Civilly. That word again. As if there were anything civil about 42 years of marriage ending in a betrayal planned by my own children. Robert, your father left me for his lawyer. A woman who asked me for a job the very next day. Oh, Mom, don't exaggerate. Lucy is very professional. When we spoke with her. When did you speak with her? The silence that followed was like a slap in the face. Robert looked at the floor. Claudia pretended to check her phone. Well, when Dad introduced us. About 3 months ago. 3 months. My family had met my husband's lover 3 months before I even knew she existed. They had had dinner with her, they had talked, they had smiled, they had pretended everything was normal while I continued to cook Anthony's dinner every night and wonder why he was coming home later and later. And it didn't occur to any of you to tell me? We just didn't know how, Claudia murmured. We thought it was better for Dad to tell you in his own way. In his own way. Over a plate of brisket and with a sentence that sliced my veins, talk to my lawyer, she's my new lover. Besides, Robert continued, there's also the issue of Grandpa's medical expenses. My father had died 5 years ago. What medical expenses was he talking about? What medical expenses? Dad's. Didn't he tell you? He was diagnosed with diabetes 2 months ago. He needs treatment, special medicines. Lucy is helping him with the private health insurance. So that was it. That's why Anthony had rushed everything. It wasn't just that he had found a younger woman. It was that he needed someone with money, with connections, with a health insurance plan that could cover his health costs. And I, with my miserable pension and my diabetes controlled with home remedies because I couldn't afford an endocrinologist, was no longer of any use to him. You knew he was sick? Of course. We went with him to the doctor last month. We went. My children had accompanied their father to the doctor, but no one had told me he was sick. 42 years sleeping next to a man, and I find out about his diabetes from my son, after he had kicked me out of the house. Mom, don't be like that, Claudia said in that voice she used to scold her children. In the end, you two couldn't stand each other anymore. We hadn't seen you happy together for years. For years? Yes, ever since Dad started at the new construction company. Around the time you turned 60. You didn't talk the same way, you didn't laugh together anymore. Since I turned 60. Since my body started to show its age, since my hands got covered in spots, since my waist widened with menopause, since my gray hairs multiplied despite the cheap dye I applied myself every month in the kitchen. But that doesn't mean the marriage was over, I protested. Mom, let's be realistic. Robert stood up and started pacing the living room as if it were his own house. You and Dad were like roommates. He had his life, you had yours. I had my life. What life? My life had been washing his clothes, cooking his food, ironing his shirts, accompanying him to company dinners where he would introduce me as my wife, and then ignore me all night while he talked business with men who never said a word to me. Besides, Claudia continued, Lucy is a very good person. She took the kids to the movies yesterday. Bought them popcorn and candy. They came home so happy. My grandchildren, who used to come to me on weekends to bake cookies and watch old movies, now had a new, young grandmother who could buy them what I couldn't afford. And it doesn't bother you that a stranger is raising your children? She's not a stranger, Mom. She's Dad's partner. They're going to live together, probably get married. The kids need to adapt. Get married. Anthony was going to get married again. At 71, my husband was going to walk down the aisle again with a woman who was the same age I was when he promised me eternal love. Has he filed for divorce? Well, that's another thing. Robert avoided my gaze. Dad says it's very complicated to get a divorce at this age. Too expensive, too time-consuming. So? They're going to live together. It's more practical. More practical. My marriage had been reduced to a matter of practicality. Anthony wasn't going to get a divorce because it wasn't financially convenient, but he wasn't going to come back to me either because it was no longer emotionally convenient. And what about me? Am I supposed to stay married forever to a man who lives with another woman? Mom, you're too old to get married again. What do you need a divorce for? I'm too old. To my own children, at 69, I was already too old to deserve a new life, to deserve respect, to deserve love. Maria arrived that night with Paul and Sophia. The kids ran to me as always, but Maria had that tense face she had inherited from her father. Mom, Robert told me everything. I think you're blowing things out of proportion. Blowing things out of proportion? Your father threw me out of my house. He didn't throw you out. He's giving you another house. A house without gas, without hot water, an hour from the city. But it's yours. And it's in a nice, quiet place. Quiet. That word again. As if quiet was the only thing a woman my age could aspire to. Maria, did you know about that woman? Well, yes. I met her a few months ago. And what? She's educated, intelligent. She speaks English, has a professional career. Has a professional career. As if that was what had been missing from our marriage. As if my 42 years of absolute dedication weren't enough because I didn't have a college degree hanging on the wall. Doesn't it bother you that she got involved with a married man? Oh, Mom, these things happen. Love doesn't follow rules. Love doesn't follow rules. But marriage does. My 42 years of life do. The children we raised together do. Paul came closer and hugged my legs. Grandma, why do you look sad? I'm not sad, sweetie. Just a little tired. Aunt Lucy told us you were going to live in a little house in the country, like Little Red Riding Hood. Aunt Lucy. She was already an aunt to my grandchildren. She had already invented a story to explain to them why the grandmother they had known their whole lives was now going to disappear to live alone in the countryside like a character in a horror movie. And what else did Aunt Lucy tell them? That you were too old to take care of a big house, but that you would be better off in the little country house. Too old. My own grandchildren had been programmed to believe I was too old to be useful, too old to matter, too old to deserve a dignified life. That night, after Maria took the children so they don't have to see Grandma cry again, I sat on my bedroom floor and dialed the last number I had left. George answered on the second ring. Mom? George, do you think I'm crazy? Why are you asking me that? Because everyone tells me I'm exaggerating, that I'm being dramatic, that I should be grateful. There was a long silence. Then George sighed. Mom, when I was 16 and Dad yelled at me that I was a disgrace to the family, you said nothing. When he kicked me out of the house for being gay, you also said nothing. And when I came back years later apologizing for being who I am, you told me I had to understand that Dad had done what he thought was best for me. George, now that he's doing the same thing to you that he did to me, you expect me to feel sorry for you? I don't expect pity. I just hoped you could help me understand if I'm being unfair. Unfair? Mom, they're treating you like a piece of old furniture that's no longer useful and can be thrown away. But no, you're not being unfair. You're being naive, as always. And he hung up again. I stayed there, on the cold floor of my bedroom, finally understanding that I had raised my children to be exactly like their father, people who used others until they were no longer convenient, people who confused love with habit and loyalty with stupidity. And I had been their best student. The day they handed me the keys to the little house in Wimberley was the day I decided I would no longer apologize for existing. The house was exactly what I expected: 2 small rooms, an outhouse, a wood-burning stove, no gas, no hot water. A place designed for an older woman to disappear quietly from the world without causing any trouble. But when I closed the door that first night, something strange happened. For the first time in 42 years, no one was waiting for me. No one needed me to make them dinner, to iron their shirt for the next day, to ask them how their day at work was. No one was going to come home drunk demanding explanations about the household expenses. No one was going to wake me up at 2 in the morning to ask me to heat up their food. The silence wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of freedom. That first week, I explored every corner of my new reality. The house had a beautiful view of the hills that surround Austin. From my bedroom window, I could watch the sunrise without anyone telling me it was too early to be awake. I could make chamomile tea at midnight without anyone asking me why I was wasting gas unnecessarily. I discovered I liked my coffee black. For decades, I had made coffee with cream and sugar because that's how Anthony liked it, and I had assumed that was the only correct way to drink it. Now, sitting on the small porch of my house, watching the vegetable vendors ride by on their bicycles, I discovered that black coffee had an intense flavor that woke me up in a different way. Not just from sleep, but from a life I had been living as a sleepwalker. The house phone didn't have long-distance service. Anthony had been very specific about that, so you don't waste money on unnecessary calls. So my children couldn't call me to ask for money, advice, or to complain about their marital problems expecting me to solve them as always. The silence of the phone became music to my ears. One morning, while sweeping the small backyard, I found tomato seeds that someone had planted years ago and that had sprouted on their own in the cracks of the cement. Rebel plants that had decided to grow without permission, without care, without anyone considering them important. I saw myself in those plants. I decided to start a garden. It was the first decision I had made in years without consulting anyone, without asking for opinions, without considering if anyone else would agree. I bought seeds with the money I had saved from not buying Anthony's blood pressure medication, which he never knew I paid for with my pension. Cucumbers, peppers, cilantro, radishes. Vegetables I could eat, that could turn my exile into survival. As I planted, I remembered that before I got married, I had worked at old Mr. Aurelio's nursery, over by the railroad tracks. I was good with plants. I had hands that knew when the earth needed water, when the leaves asked for shade, when the roots were ready to grow. I had forgotten that version of myself, the Dolores who knew how to make things grow, who understood the secret language of nature. The first tomato I harvested, I ate standing in the garden, with salt and a squeeze of lime, as the sun set behind the hills. It tasted like triumph. It tasted like independence. It tasted like a woman who no longer needed to ask for permission to feed herself. 2 weeks after I moved, Robert showed up unannounced. He arrived in his new SUV, the one he had bought after Anthony lent him money to expand his accounting firm. He had that look of feigned concern he put on when he wanted to ask me for something. "Mom, I came to see how you are." "I'm fine." "Really? Because you have us worried. Maria says you're not answering the phone." "I don't have long distance." "Oh, right, Dad told us. But we could have fixed that." "We could have." The conditional tense. Like everything my children had offered me for years, help that might arrive if I behaved as they expected. "I don't need long distance, Robert. Are you mad at us?" The question surprised me. Not for what he asked, but how he asked it. As if my anger were something irrational, something that had to be cured so that everyone could go back to feeling comfortable. "I'm not mad. I'm learning." "Learning what?" "To live my own life." He laughed. A nervous laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, you've always lived your own life." "No, Robert. I lived your lives. Your father's life. Now I'm living mine." "Oh, Mom, don't be so dramatic. You were always very independent." Independent. What a curious word coming from a man who had spent 38 years expecting his mother to solve all his emotional and financial problems. Independent? When, Robert? "Well, always. You decided what to cook, how to decorate the house. I decided between the options your father allowed me. I cooked what he liked. I decorated with the money he gave me if he was in a good mood." Robert looked around my little house as if he were assessing a property to buy. His eyes stopped on the garden that had begun to flourish. "You're planting things?" "Yes." "What for?" "They sell everything at the market." "Because I want to." Those 4 words came out of my mouth with a force I hadn't felt in decades. "Because I want to." No further explanation, no justification, no asking for permission. "Well, but Mom, I also came to talk about something else." There it was. The real reason for his visit. "Maria is pregnant again." He waited for my reaction. He expected me to shout with joy, to ask for details, to immediately start planning how I was going to help financially, how I would take care of the baby, what I could do to make things easier. "That's nice," I said simply. "That's nice? That's it? What do you want me to say?" "Well, I don't know. You always got so excited about the pregnancies." "I always got excited because it always meant they needed me again. That I had a function, a purpose. That I could continue to be useful by taking care of grandchildren, preparing food for the new mother, spending my pension on gifts for the baby. I'm very happy for Maria. I hope everything goes well. Aren't you going to come help when the baby is born?" "I haven't been invited." "But Mom, it's understood. You're the grandmother. Lucy is a grandmother now too, isn't she? And she has more money to help." Robert became uncomfortable. He stood up and walked to the window. "Mom, Lucy can't replace you." "Why not? You've all replaced me with her and everything else." "That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you invited me to a family dinner?" "It's just, things are weird with this whole divorce thing." "There is no divorce, Robert. Your father is living with another woman but is still married to me. I am the legitimate wife living in exile so he can play house with his girlfriend." "Mom, don't talk like that." "How do you want me to talk? Sweetly about the woman who destroyed my marriage? With gratitude towards the man who threw me out like a bag of trash?" Robert sighed with that exasperation he had learned from his father, that way of making women feel that their emotions were excessive and inconvenient. "You know what, Mom? I came to invite you to dinner on Sunday. The whole family will be there. Dad too." "With Lucy?" "Yes, with Lucy. We thought it was time for all of us to try to get along." "Get along?" As if the problem were my attitude and not the fact that my husband was living with another woman while I was exiled in a house without a gas line. "No, thank you." "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not going." "But Mom, it's important. We want to be a normal family again. A normal family where the betrayed wife smiles and makes small talk with her husband's mistress while the children pretend everything is fine." "Robert, leave." "What?" I said leave. "You're no longer welcome here." "Mom, you're being ridiculous." "I'm being clear. I don't want to see you until you can come here without asking me to pretend that my humiliation is normal. And if I don't come back? Then you don't come back. I lived 69 years before having this conversation. I can live whatever I have left without having it again." Robert left without saying goodbye, peeling out in his SUV like an angry teenager. I watched him drive away from my window, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades: peace. That night, I made dinner just for myself. Quesadillas with squash blossoms from my garden, salsa verde made in the mortar and pestle I had found in the cupboard, and hibiscus iced tea sweetened with honey my neighbor, Carmen, had given me. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, listening to the crickets chirping in the yard. For the first time in 42 years, no one asked me if there was enough salt in the food. No one criticized the temperature of the tortillas. No one ignored me while they ate only to demand I clean everything up afterward. After dinner, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked at the stars. They were the same stars I had seen my whole life, but now I was seeing them through my own eyes, not through the eyes of a woman who existed only to serve others. And for the first time since Anthony told me, "Talk to my lawyer, she's my new lover," I smiled. Not out of sadness, not out of bitterness, not out of resignation. I smiled because I was alive. And because finally, after 69 years, I was beginning to live. 3 weeks after I threw Robert out of my house, they all came together. Maria, Robert, Stephen, and even Anthony. Like an official delegation sent to negotiate with a rebel who had gotten out of control. I watched them arrive from my bedroom window, 2 SUVs parked in front of my little house like a planned invasion. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Anthony. He was still the man I had fallen in love with 45 years ago, but now he looked older, thinner. The diabetes was consuming him, though he was dressed in new clothes that Lucy had obviously bought for him. A brand-name shirt I never could have afforded, pants that fit him better than the ones he had worn during our marriage. I went out to the porch to meet them, wiping my hands on the apron I'd been wearing to work in the garden. My hands had dirt under the nails, tomato stains on the fingers. Hands that worked, that created, that no longer existed solely to serve others. "Hello, Dolores," Anthony said in that voice that had once whispered words of love to me and now sounded like a salesman trying to be polite to a difficult customer. "Anthony." I didn't say, "Hello." I didn't smile. I didn't pretend I was happy to see him. My children exchanged nervous glances, as if my lack of courtesy were an illness that needed to be cured. "Can we come in?" Maria asked. "We need to talk to you." "We're fine out here," I replied, not moving from the porch. "Say what you came to say." Stephen cleared his throat. The same Stephen who had hugged me with fake tears while he stole my house. Now he looked like a scolded child, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, we came because we're worried about you." Worried about me, or about yourselves? About you, Robert intervened. You've been acting very strange since you moved here. Strange. As if reclaiming my dignity were a pathology. Strange how? Well, you don't answer calls, you don't want to come to family gatherings, you hung up on Maria when she called to invite you to the baby shower. The baby shower. Where all her friends would be, where they would ask me about Anthony, where I would have to pretend everything was fine while my daughter received gifts from people who knew perfectly well my husband had traded me in for a younger woman. I don't have money for gifts, I said simply. It wasn't about the gift, Maria mumbled. It was so you could be with me. Like Lucy was with me when your father threw me out of my house? The silence was awkward. Anthony looked towards the hills as if he hadn't heard. Mom, Stephen said, we also came because there's a legal problem. There it was. The real reason for the visit. What legal problem? The papers you signed, there are irregularities. The notary says there could be trouble if someone contests them. Someone like who? Like George, Robert said. He spoke to a lawyer. He says he's going to sue because the sale of the house was fraudulent. George? My gay son, the one who had been cast out of the family, who had grown up feeling he had to hide who he was to deserve love, was now the only one trying to protect me. And what do you want me to do? Talk to him, Maria said. Explain to him that it was all legal, that you agreed to it. Agreed to what? To being deceived? To having my house stolen from me? Nobody stole anything from you, Anthony spoke for the first time since his greeting. His voice held the authority he had used for decades to make me feel that my opinions didn't matter. I left you the house in the country. Many women your age don't even have that. Women my age. As if at 69 I were no longer a whole person, but a category of discard who should be grateful for scraps. Anthony, you were the one who decided our marriage was over. You were the one who left with another woman. You were the one who planned all of this with our children to leave me with nothing. Don't you dare tell me now that I should be grateful. Dolores, don't exaggerate. You know things between us hadn't been working for years. According to whom? Because I was still washing your clothes, cooking your food, taking care of you when you were sick. If things weren't working, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't we try to fix them? Because there was nothing left to fix, he said with a coldness that took my breath away. We were no longer compatible. Compatible. 42 years of marriage reduced to a compatibility issue, as if we were two smartphone apps that no longer worked well together. And Lucy is compatible with you? Lucy understands my needs. His needs. Not our needs. Not the needs of the family we had built together. His needs as a 71-year-old man who wanted to feel young again. And my needs? Did you ever once ask what my needs were? Your needs were always very simple, Dolores. A house, food, for the kids to be okay. My needs were always very simple. As if I were a house pet that only required food and shelter to be content. Do you know what my needs were, Anthony? Respect. Companionship. To be asked how I was feeling once in a while. To be included in important decisions. To not be treated like the maid who also happened to sleep with you. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Mom, don't talk like that. How do you want me to talk? Sweetly about the 42 years I wasted taking care of a man who had already decided I was useless to him. You didn't waste them, Maria said. You were happy. We saw you happy. You saw me content. There's a big difference. I pulled something from the pocket of my apron. It was a photograph I had found among my things while packing. A photo from our wedding, where I was smiling with the innocence of a 20-year-old, clinging to Anthony's arm as if he were my savior. Do you see this woman? I showed them the photo. This woman believed that love was about giving everything and asking for nothing in return. This woman thought that being a good wife meant disappearing so her husband could shine. This woman believed that if she sacrificed enough, one day she would be valued. I tore the photograph in half. This woman was naive. The paper disintegrated between my fingers like confetti, scattering pieces of a life that no longer existed across the porch floor. Anthony turned pale. Dolores, you're having an emotional episode. No, Anthony. I'm having a moment of clarity. I turned toward the door of my house, but before going inside, I faced them one last time. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully because I'm not going to repeat it. You treated me like a piece of old furniture that could be moved from one room to another for your convenience. You used me until you decided you no longer needed me, and now you want me to smile and be grateful for the scraps you left me. Stephen tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. For 42 years, I believed my job was to make all of you happy. I thought that if I gave myself completely, you would love me. But the problem wasn't that I wasn't enough. The problem was that you never learned to value what you had. I looked Anthony directly in the eyes. You have diabetes, Anthony. You need care, medicine, a special diet. Lucy will take care of you as long as you have money to pay for her legal and medical services. But when the money runs out, when your illness gets worse, when you're no longer the successful man she thinks you are, she's going to do exactly what you did to me." Anthony opened his mouth to protest, but I continued. "And you," I looked at my children, "are going to discover that raising your children without the free grandmother who watched them, fed them, and spoiled them is going to be much more expensive and complicated than you imagine." Maria had tears in her eyes. "Mom, we don't want to lose you. You already lost me. You lost me the day you decided my pain was less important than your comfort. You lost me when you chose to stay on your father's good side instead of defending the woman who raised you." Stephen took a step toward me. "Mom, we can fix this." "No, Stephen. You can't. Because fixing it would mean acknowledging that you betrayed me, and none of you are willing to do that." I went into my house and locked the door. I heard them talking outside for several minutes, arguing in low voices, trying to decide what to do with the woman who had rebelled against the family order they had established. Finally, I heard the SUVs drive away. I sat in my small living room, surrounded by the silence that no longer scared me, and I smiled. It hadn't been easy, but I had said everything I needed to say. I had closed a chapter of my life that had gone on for far too long. That night, as I ate dinner in my small kitchen, I remembered something my mother had told me when I was a girl. "Mija, in life you'll have to choose between being liked and being respected. And when you're old, you'll understand that it's better to be respected." It took me 69 years to understand what she meant. But I finally understood. 6 months after the confrontation with my family, I woke up one February morning wanting to do something I hadn't done in 50 years, buy myself a new dress. Not for a wedding, not for a funeral, not to impress anyone. Just because I wanted to. I took the bus downtown to Austin, something I also hadn't done alone in decades. During our marriage, Anthony always drove. "It's too dangerous for a woman to be on public transportation alone," he'd say, but I suspect it was more that he didn't want me to discover I could move through the world independently. The bus was full of women like me, workers, survivors, women who had learned to navigate life with the resources they had. A lady with grocery bags smiled at me when I sat down next to her. She didn't ask why I was traveling alone, didn't look at me with pity, didn't assume I needed help. She just offered me a piece of gum and we continued the journey in silent companionship. At a downtown market, I found a stall selling cotton dresses. The owner was a woman my age, with weathered hands and a genuine smile. When I told her I wanted something pretty but practical, she showed me a blue dress with tiny white flowers. "This color will look beautiful with your skin," she told me. "And feel how soft the fabric is. It's cool for the heat but elegant for any occasion." I tried on the dress in the small, makeshift fitting room behind the stall. When I saw myself in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. I wasn't the exhausted woman I had seen reflected for years. I was a 69-year-old woman who looked alive. The blue made my gray eyes look brighter, the flowers brought joy to my face. "Are you taking it?" the vendor asked when I came out. "Yes. And I want shoes, too." I bought a pair of comfortable but pretty, coffee-colored shoes that matched a small purse I had been admiring. I spent almost my entire pension check for that month, but for the first time in my adult life, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. On the way home, I stopped at a hair salon. "I want a new cut," I told the stylist, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. "Anything specific in mind?" "Something that makes me look like the woman I am now, not the one I was before." She cut my gray hair to my shoulders, with layers that gave it volume and movement. When she finished, she applied a little makeup. Not to cover the wrinkles, but to highlight the eyes that had seen too much but still shone. "You look beautiful, ma'am," she said as she removed the cape. "You look free." Free. That word followed me all the way back to Wimberley. That afternoon, sitting on my porch in my new dress, admiring my garden which was now bearing abundant fruit, the phone rang. It was George. "Mom, how are you?" "Good, Mijo. Better than good." "You sound different." "I feel different." There was a pause. "Mom, I wanted to tell you something. I won the case." George had sued over the fraudulent sale of my house. For months he had been fighting with lawyers, gathering evidence, proving that Stephen had tricked me with forged documents. "What does that mean?" "It means the house is yours again. Dad has to return it to you and also pay damages for the fraud." My house. The house where I had raised my children, where I had lived the best and worst moments of my marriage. The house I thought I had lost forever. "George, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, Mom. Just tell me if you want it back." The question surprised me. 6 months ago, I would have cried with happiness at the chance to get my house back. But now, sitting in my little house that I had turned into a home, watching my garden flourish, feeling the peace I had built from scratch. Can I think about it? Think about it? Mom, it's your house. It was my house when I was a different woman. Now I don't know if I want to be that woman again. I couldn't sleep that night. I walked through my small house, touching the simple furniture I had bought piece by piece, admiring the plants I had managed to grow, breathing the air that wasn't contaminated by resentment or reproaches. Did I want to go back to the big house, to the memories of 42 unhappy years of marriage? Did I want to go back to the spaces where I had been invisible, where I had lived to serve others? The following week, George came to visit. He arrived with his partner, a gentle man named Carlos who worked as an elementary school teacher. It was the first time George had brought someone important to meet me. "Mom, this is Carlos. We've been together for 3 years." Carlos hugged me as if we had always been family. "Mrs. Rodriguez, George has told me so much about you. It's a real pleasure to meet you." I cooked for the 3 of them. Chiles rellenos with vegetables from my garden, pinto beans, handmade tortillas. We ate in my small dining room, talking about their jobs, their plans, the life they had built together in Houston. "Mom," George said to me after we ate, "I want you to know that Carlos was the one who helped me realize I had to sue over the house. He told me I couldn't let them do that to you." I looked at Carlos with new eyes. This man, who didn't know me, who owed me nothing, had encouraged my son to fight for me when my other children had betrayed me. "Thank you," I told him simply. "You're welcome, ma'am. George told me everything you sacrificed for your family. It just seemed so unfair how they treated you." After lunch, George and I sat on the porch while Carlos helped with the dishes. "Mom, have you decided about the house?" "Yes. I want you to sell it." "Sell it?" "But Mom, I want you to sell it and split the money between the 4 of you. In equal parts. Including Robert, Maria, and Stephen? After everything they did to you. Especially them. Because I want them to understand that I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it because I'm a better person than they were to me." George looked at me for a long time. "And what will you do?" "I'm going to stay here. This house is truly mine, because I chose it. Because I made it a home with my own 2 hands. Because here, no one tells me what to do, how to live, or why I should be grateful for scraps." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." That afternoon, after George and Carlos left, I sat down to write a letter. I hadn't written anything personal in decades, but the words flowed as if they had been waiting all this time to be released. "To my children, it has been 6 months since I came to live here. 6 months in which I have learned who I am when I don't have to be who you need me to be." George won the case. The big house is mine again. But I have decided to sell it and divide the money among the 4 of you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to close this chapter without resentment. With my share of the money, I am going to fix up this little house, install a gas line and a hot water heater, and expand my garden. I am going to live the years I have left in a place where I am respected, where my decisions matter, where no one treats me like an inconvenience. Do not expect me to forgive you. Forgiveness is something that is earned, not something that is owed. But do not expect me to live the rest of my life hating you, either. Hate is too heavy a burden for a woman my age. If you ever want to meet the real Dolores, the one who exists when she is not serving others, you know where to find me. But come with respect, with humility, and with a desire to meet a new person. Because the woman you knew, the one who put everyone before herself, no longer exists. With self-love, your mother. I sent the letter by mail to each of my children. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't need one. A week later, Carmen, my neighbor, knocked on my door. "Dolores, do you have a minute? I want to ask you something." Carmen was 75 and had recently been widowed. Her family lived out of state and rarely visited. "Of course, Carmen. What do you need?" "I was wondering if you'd be interested in starting a business with me." "A business?" "Yes. I've seen how you cook, how you tend your garden. I thought we could make food to sell. There are a lot of working people in town who don't have time to cook, and we have the time and the experience." The idea excited me immediately. "What kind of food?" "Home-cooked meals. Stews, salsas, fresh tortillas. We could start small, selling door to door, and if it works out, maybe rent a little spot." I couldn't sleep that night from the excitement. For the first time in my life, someone was proposing I be a partner, not an employee. Someone valued my skills, not just my willingness to serve. The next day, I told Carmen yes. We started that same week, cooking in our homes and selling at the Saturday market. People began to recognize our food, to ask for specific dishes, to recommend us to their relatives. For the first time in 69 years, I had a job I had chosen, where I was valued for my talent, where no one treated me as if they were doing me a favor by paying me. And for the first time in 69 years, I felt completely alive. A year later, as I was preparing masa for tamales in the kitchen of my newly expanded house, I heard a knock on the door. It was a December afternoon, the air smelled of ponche and buñuelos, and I was preparing the Christmas orders for our business, which had now become the Comadre's Kitchen, a small restaurant Carmen and I had opened in downtown Wimberley. When I opened the door, I found Maria. She was thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, holding her 6-month-old baby. Behind her, in a modest car I didn't recognize, were Paul and Sophia, my grandchildren, looking at me through the window with the shy curiosity of children who aren't sure if they'll be welcomed. "Hi, Mom," Maria said in a voice I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. A small, insecure voice, like someone who has lost all the certainties they once took for granted. "Maria." I didn't invite her in immediately. I stood in the doorway, studying this woman who had chosen her father's lover over her own mother, who had normalized my humiliation, who had programmed my grandchildren to believe I was too old to matter. Can we talk?" I opened the door completely and let her pass. The children ran in but stopped short when they saw that my house had changed completely. Where there had once been 2 small, dark rooms, there was now a bright living room with large windows, a modern kitchen with a center island, and a dining room that could comfortably seat 8 people. "Grandma, your house is so pretty," Paul shouted, running to hug me. I hugged him back, feeling my heart both contract and expand. He was my grandson, but he was also the son of a woman who had betrayed me. Love and caution battled in my chest. "Thank you, Mijo. Do you want some hibiscus tea? I just made a fresh pitcher." While I poured drinks for the children, Maria sat in my new living room, looking around with an expression that I couldn't tell was admiration or envy. "Mom, this looks incredible. Where did the money for all these changes come from?" "From the business," I answered simply. "Carmen and I sold food for 6 months and saved up to expand the house. Now we have the restaurant." "You have a restaurant?" "I have a business. A business that I chose, that I built, that I run myself." Maria nursed the baby while the children explored the garden that now took up the entire backyard. From the window, I could see them running between the fruit trees I had planted, picking cherry tomatoes, marveling at the flowers growing in planters made from recycled tires. "Mom, I came to apologize." The words came out of her mouth as if it pained her to say them. As if they were shards of glass she had to spit out. "Apologize for what, specifically?" "For everything. For not defending you when Dad left you. For normalizing the situation with Lucy. For letting the kids call her aunt. For not being there for you when you needed me most." It was a good speech. Probably rehearsed. But there was something in her eyes that told me it wasn't just a speech. "What happened, Maria?" She began to cry. Not the manipulative crying she had used for years to get things from me, but the deep sobs of someone who has lost everything they thought was solid in their life. "Michael left me," she said between sobs. "He left with a coworker. Younger, no kids, has a career. He left me alone with 3 kids and all the debt." Michael, her husband. The man who had smiled while spending my money on his wedding, who had treated me with the superficial politeness one uses for household staff. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I know how that feels." "No, Mom, you don't understand. It's different. I have small children, a part-time job, no savings. Michael took everything of value and left me with the debt." It was different, she was right. Because I had 69 years of accumulated experience and wisdom when I was betrayed. She was 35 with 3 children who depended completely on her. "What do you need?" "I'm not here to ask for money," she said quickly. "I know I have no right. I'm here to ask for, I don't know, advice. Help understanding how you survive this." I sat next to her on the sofa I had bought with my own money, chosen according to my own taste. A comfortable yet elegant sofa, navy blue like the dress I had bought the day I decided to be reborn. "Maria, do you want me to tell you the truth?" "Yes. The difference between your situation and mine is that you still have time to build a new life. I had to learn at 69 that I had been living the wrong life. You can learn it at 35. But I don't know how. My whole life I've depended on someone else. First on you and Dad, then on Michael. I don't know how to be independent. You learn. The way you learn anything important in life, by doing it badly at first, by making mistakes, by getting back up, by trying again." Paul ran in from the garden with a tomato in his hand. "Grandma, look. I found a red one." "Very good, Mijo. Wash it in the kitchen and you can eat it." As Paul washed his tomato, Maria looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the look of a daughter expecting her mother to solve her problems. It was the look of one woman asking another for advice. "How did you start? How did you get from the day Dad left you to this?" She gestured around my transformed house. "I stopped waiting for others to give me value and I started giving it to myself. I stopped asking for permission to exist and I just started existing. I stopped believing my only function was to serve others and discovered I had my own talents, opinions, and dreams." "Weren't you scared? Being alone at your age?" "Terrified. But I discovered something. Chosen solitude is very different from imposed loneliness. When your father left me, I was alone in a house full of humiliating memories. Now, I'm alone in a house full of my own decisions." Maria nodded, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't fully understand yet. She couldn't, because understanding only comes with experience. Will you ever forgive me? Maria, forgiveness isn't something you give like a Christmas present. It's something you build with actions, with real change, with genuine respect. What can I do? First, stop treating me like your plan B, don't come to me only when you have no other options. Second, stop expecting me to fix your life. I'm your mother, not your emotional safety net. Third, teach your children that older people deserve respect, not pity. And if I do that? If you do that, maybe we can start to build a new relationship. Not as a mother and daughter who owe each other everything, but as two adult women who choose to be in each other's lives. That afternoon, after Maria and the children left, I sat on my porch and watched the sunset. At 70 years old, I had a thriving business, a house I had designed to my own taste, a bank account I managed all by myself, and for the first time in decades, peace of mind. The phone rang. It was George. Mom, how are you? Good, me Joe. Maria came to visit today. Really? And how was it? Different. Real. For the first time, she didn't come asking me to fix her life, but asking me how to fix hers. That's progress. Yes. Small, but progress nonetheless. Mom, I wanted to tell you something. Carlos and I are getting married next year. A small ceremony, just close family. I wanted to ask if you would like to be there. My heart filled with a joy I hadn't felt in years. Not the joy of being needed, but the joy of being included. Not the happiness of being useful, but the happiness of being loved. I would love to be there, me Joe. I love you, Mom. Not for what you do for me, but for who you are. After I hung up, I sat for a long time watching the stars. The same stars I had seen for 70 years, but which I now saw through the eyes of a woman who finally knew who she was. I thought of Anthony, who, according to George, was still living with Lucy but was getting sicker, more dependent, more expensive to maintain. I thought of Robert and Stephen, who hadn't tried to contact me since I distributed the money from the house. I thought of Maria, trying to figure out how to be an independent woman at 35. I didn't feel pity for any of them. I didn't feel resentment, either. I felt something that took me a long time to identify: indifference. The peace of knowing that their decisions no longer affected me, that their happiness or suffering no longer determined mine. I got up, picked up my teacup, and went into my house. My real house, where every piece of furniture had been chosen by me, where every decision was mine, where every morning I woke up as the person I wanted to be. Before going to sleep, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I saw a 70-year-old woman with shining silver hair, wrinkles that told stories of recovered smiles, and eyes that had learned to see their own worth. Good night, Dolores, I said to my reflection. Welcome to your life. Have you ever felt like you were living for others and lost yourself in the process? Do you know someone who had to start over after 60? Tell me your experience in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Maybe this message will reach someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to start living your own life.